The conflict between neighboring Ethiopia and Eritrea began last month. It intensified last week when Eritrean aircraft bombed the Ethiopian border town of Adigrat on Thursday, reportedly killing at least 4 people and injuring 30. The fighting erupted when Eritrean forces took up positions on land Ethiopia claims as being within its borders. Since then, hundreds of Eritreans and Ethiopians have been killed in ground and air battles fought on 3 fronts along the 625-mile border. Ethiopia's prime minister called the attacks a betrayal of the friendship between the two countries.
Had we suspected that our friends are capable of targeting and murdering school children by air raids, we would have taken more precautions.
The president of Eritrea said his country faced serious choices.
What matters here is, do we have to be drifted by the escalation? Do we have to be desperate and very reactive to what is happening? Or do we have to seriously commit ourselves to restraint and persist in finding a peaceful solution?
The conflict is new but has old roots. Eritrea and Ethiopia were historically separate entities. Italy colonized Eritrea in the 19th century and under Mussolini took over Ethiopia in 1936. In 1952, the United Nations granted Ethiopia's Emperor Haile Selassie administrative jurisdiction over Eritrea, which he then annexed in 1960. Eritrea won its independence from Ethiopia in 1993 after fighting alongside Ethiopia's current leaders to depose the dictator who had taken power. The precise border between the two countries was never quite worked out. The dispute is over a barren piece of land, the Yurga Triangle, which Ethiopia claims is part of its Tigray province and whose status has been ill-defined for more than a century. A border commission set up in 1996 was unable to settle the dispute. Eritrea has accused Ethiopian officials of trying to colonize the area over the last year by sending in thousands of settlers and pushing out the Eritrean inhabitants. On Sunday, the leaders of Eritrea and Ethiopia accepted an American proposal to halt the air attacks.
We're joined now by Susan Rice, Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs. She's been in Eritrea and Ethiopia recently working on a proposal to end the fighting. Welcome.
Thank you.
These two countries were once allies. The two leaders we just saw were considered close friends. What happened?
Well, I think in the first instance, the fact that when Eritrea became independent, the borders were never entirely fully defined, has contributed to this. There are obviously also some underlying political and economic tensions between the two countries that perhaps have been manifested in this most recent flare-up along the border.
What kinds of political and economic tensions are you talking about?
Well, on the economic front, the two countries are pursuing sovereign economic policies that haven't always been compatible. There have been issues with respect to their currencies, issues with respect to their relationships to the international financial institutions and their macroeconomic policies that have made it in cases at times sometimes difficult for them to harmonize their economic policies, and as a result tensions have emerged. On the political front, these are countries that are taking their own sometimes quite different paths towards participatory democracy. Neither one of them is fully there yet, but they've approached it differently, and at times that also has led to different perspectives and divergent approaches.
You were shuttling back and forth between Eritrea and Ethiopia. What were you hearing?
Well, I think we were hearing several things. In the first instance, we were hearing both sides express what we believe to be a genuine desire to resolve this conflict peacefully, and a genuine desire to get to the root causes of the conflict. But both sides understand that, that the border has not been fully and clearly defined, and at the end of the day, one of the crucial steps forward will be the final determination of the border and its actual demarcation on the ground.
Now, there was a commission that attempted to come up with a demarcation of the border. Why was it that commission wasn't able to come up with some finality?
Well, I think the commission itself ended up being overtaken by events. The tensions on the border erupted rather suddenly in fighting. And once the fighting emerged, I think confidence broke down on both sides, and both sides felt the need to look to third parties, and in this case the United States and Rwanda, as friends and partners of both, and asked if we might lend our support to help them find a peaceful way out of the conflict.
And what was it that you came up with?
Well, we spent a good deal of time now, almost actually a month, listening very carefully to the perspectives of both sides, trying to understand how they see a peaceful solution. We actually found a good deal of common ground between the two sides, and we put together a series of recommendations as friendly facilitators as to how they might resolve their differences. And where there wasn't common ground, we tried to suggest a compromise, a middle path to lead to a peaceful solution. We also had urged both sides to stop the airstrikes and the threat of airstrikes, which have been one of the most dangerous and deadly elements of the recent conflict.
And did both sides, did both sides sign off on what you had come up with?
Well, both sides have most recently agreed to halt the airstrikes and the threat of the use of airstrikes, and that's a positive step forward. With respect to the package of recommendations we've put on the table, the Ethiopian government has made it clear that it's prepared to accept the recommendations. The Eritrean government has said that it accepts many aspects of it, but there are specific issues of implementation and detail that need to be worked out. And more recently, in fact, they've suggested that the conflict has evolved to the extent that perhaps direct discussions between the two sides are what's needed to resolve the conflict.
And how likely is that to happen?
Well, I think unfortunately in the near term it's not likely because there are some fundamental issues which divide them. The government of Ethiopia has made it very clear that it's not prepared for face-to-face negotiations unless and until Eritrea withdraws from territory that Ethiopia claims belongs to Ethiopia. So there's some stumbling blocks still in the road.
And is that one the main stumbling block, the reluctance on the part of Eritrea to withdraw from the territory?
Well, that's a stumbling block from the Ethiopian perspective. I'm sure the Eritreans, on the other hand, view this as land that is theirs. And so the question is, without prejudicing the ultimate issue of whose land is whose, which is really for experts to determine, neutral third-party technical experts, is there a way to bring both sides to a peaceful resolution of this and stop the fighting long enough for the border itself to actually be demarcated?
And how would you describe U.S. interests in this conflict?
Well, the United States is friends of both these countries and sees them as linchpins for a larger effort in the Horn of Africa to bring about stability and food security and to contain some threats that emanate from neighboring countries like Sudan and Somalia that are dangerous not only to the countries in the region but potentially to the United States. And so we have an interest in trying to see two countries which up until this point had made quite substantial progress in their economic development and political reform find a swift and peaceful way forward.
Moving on to Nigeria, recently the new military leader of Nigeria released 9 political prisoners. How do you interpret that?
Well, I think this is a positive step and one that we've welcomed. Nigeria has had a sudden but I think very momentous window of opportunity with new leadership coming to the fore. Leadership that says it's committed to making credible the transition to civilian democratic government. And we certainly hope that commitment is genuine. We see positive early signs in the release of these 9 political prisoners, including some very prominent political prisoners. And we hope this will be followed by the release of all political prisoners without conditions, and that steps will then be taken to make this transition process real.
The most prominent political prisoner, Mr. Mushood Abiola, has not been released. Is that troubling to the United States? He was the person who won, who was the apparent winner of democratic elections in 1993.
Well, we have long called for his release, and we still think that's a fundamental step, along with every other political prisoner, in opening up a very genuine and credible democratic process. And so we do hope that he very soon will be released, and that he and everybody else who may wish to compete in the upcoming elections are allowed to do so.
Speaking of credibility, you mentioned credibility earlier. Military dictators in Nigeria have been promising over the years that they're going to restore civilian democratic government. Why do you believe them now?
Well, in the past, actually, there have been instances of military leaders in Nigeria handing over to civilian governments, and in fact, President Obasanjo, who was among the prisoners whose release was announced yesterday was the prime example of that. So it's not unprecedented. And we would hope that this would again be a turning point in Nigeria's history where the military would recognize that it can best serve the country by playing the traditional role of a military, responsive to civilian control, so that Nigeria can take its rightful place as a leader not only in Africa but around the world.
President Clinton spoke with the current military leader of Nigeria the day before these prisoners were released. Is there a connection?
Well, I don't think it's possible to draw a direct connection. President Clinton conveyed a general but very important message, which is that the United States wants to be helpful to Nigeria as it makes a credible transition to democracy. We want a stable, prosperous, democratic Nigeria, and if we can be helpful in bringing that about, we would like to. But the steps like the one that was taken yesterday is important, and more need to be taken for Nigeria to earn its rightful place.
The former ambassador to Nigeria, Walter Carrington, is quoted as saying that Nigeria is the most important nation in Africa. What are the U.S. interests there?
Well, Nigeria, first of all, is the largest nation in Africa in terms of population. It has got some of Africa's most important natural resources, oil, gas, and other resources. It has a large military which has actually made some important contributions to regional peace and security in Liberia and more recently in Sierra Leone. So we have an interest in that economy growing and achieving its full potential. We have an obvious interest in promotion of democracy and respect for human rights. And we'd also like to see Nigeria continue to play a leadership role in Africa and a constructive role in regional affairs.
So you're saying that notwithstanding the leadership there, Nigeria has nonetheless, in certain respects, been a stabilizing force in that part of Africa?
Well, Nigeria has played a constructive role in peacekeeping in various parts of West Africa. But unless and until Nigeria itself is democratic and respects human rights, it too may well be a source of much greater instability as political repression limits the ability of the people of Nigeria to achieve their full potential. So we hope that the progress that we've seen in the last little while will continue, that Nigeria will be a force for stability within its own borders as well as in the broader sub-region, and that this actually represents a good opening and a way forward.
Assistant Secretary Rice, thank you for being here.
Thank you.